Hello, and thanks for joining. This is the weekly Antelope Node Operators Roundtable. Today is the 22nd of November, 2023, and we'll be discussing a few things, status update on 5.0 RC3, some upcoming changes to BLS that'll be part of that RC3, our progress on a test with a really fun name. I'll leave that as a clickbait, if you will, and also an update on instant finality progress for the 6.0 release. So with that, we will get right into it. So first off, RC3 of 5.0. We're still tracking against releasing that between the 6th and the 14th of December. It basically the work that has been kind of blocking its release is dev done, if you will, but it's still awaiting review. And of course, with US holidays for Thanksgiving, that is a little bit jammed up right now. So once folks return from holiday and that gets reviewed, pending no major changes needed, that will be able to get merged in, and we'll do a release at that time. What those changes are, we briefly mentioned right before we hit record on this call, which are some changes to the BLS host functions. And just to sort of characterize this, there's a trade-off, that we're weighing between a more performant implementation and an implementation with better abstraction, which just gives us the ability to change implementation in the future more easily. And so the effort has been around really profiling that and understanding the right way forward for that. So those changes will be coming soon. We may actually discuss that a little bit further in the context of Jungle. We'll see when we get into sort of the open discussion bit of this. And then we're also working on something that we've internally called chicken dance. So you might hear that phrasing every once in a while. What it is a Genesis replay test. So the idea here is that we can quickly replay from Genesis by sort of splitting the block log into chunks and doing the replay of a chunk in parallel. And the purpose of this test is for us to be able to quickly test consensus and be sure that a version doesn't have any consensus breaking changes in it. And you can imagine that for a release like 6.0, that will be very important, given that we are going to be fundamentally changing how consensus works on Leap. So, and that, we've got kind of a draft of that. It's being internally reviewed, and will be iterated on. But yes, so that test will soon be at our disposal for those sorts of things. And then on 6.0, instant finality, of course, remains the keystone feature there. And we basically, the pull requests, the code getting merged into the 6.0 branch has started flowing again after we basically took a period to pause and do some redesign. Early on, we realized that the what's the word I'm looking for? The pattern set forth in the hot stuff paper is only partially applicable, and there were some implementation details that became very relevant in the context of how Antelope Network's function that required some creative solutions. And so much of that redesign work has occurred. The thing is that plan never survives first contact with reality, right? And so that's why we're in this prototyping phase now of actually implementing what we've designed, not with the intention that this initial implementation is precisely what will be shipped, but rather with the intention of being sure that when the rubber hits the road, what we've designed functions as expected. So we'll get some learnings from that, and then do another iteration on it to fix any issues and optimize it further. One interesting thing to point out here is that in the world of software development, often most of what you do is kind of reinventing the wheel over and over and over again in different contexts that are subtly different. And so therefore, there are patterns and blueprints that you can apply, and things are a lot more predictable and cookie cutter. Instant Finality is one of those projects that very much is not that way. It's sort of high research, high mathematics, kind of computer science rather than business software development per se. And so yes, we're taking a very academic approach, if you will, to this, and scientific approach to this. And but it's nice to be back into engineering mode with this prototyping phase. And that's all I had in the way of status updates. Before I get into the discussion topics, are there any questions on any of those?
Well, we did add a little sidebar discussion, which probably doesn't make it into the video, so we can
great.
surface that too.
I wasn't interrupting, sorry.
No, that's okay. I just did. I did it. But, yeah, we were talking about the replay testing, and great
the chicken dance.
Yeah, chicken dance. I am so thin-skinned. I don't know what it is. Anytime people say chicken dance, and I think I'm working on it, I just feel like an idiot. I got to get over it. You guys are all good, but
you feel like the chicken that's dancing? I mean, I can envision it that way. Okay. Henceforth, anytime I hear it, I will think of you dancing like a chicken. Love you, mean it. What I was saying was talking about the chicken dance and kind of talking about the consensus and catching, we broke something that wouldn't be an issue until you go back in time, right? And being one of the only people who's a glutton for punishment, I was replaying EOS, and it wasn't the block history or the log, it was the state history, and the way, obviously, it's a higher cerebral level of processing and what it's paying attention to, and tripped up on those. So Eric, I know you know, I was just kind of giving context for the video or whatever, but I'd asked, hey, does this chicken dance possibly include logic around state history? Because that's actually where I picked up on, because we don't really test it, not a lot of people use it, I think, in dev, but it is primarily the source of integration for almost everything layer 2. So anyway, he said no.
I mean that's a good point. And the answer was no. We're not testing replay with the shift history right now. And I don't disagree that we could do better there. The good news is we have been improving in our unit tests of shift, so that's good. And then the consensus with the blocks log is something that's important for us to do, that we're doing now, but we're doing it in a really inefficient way. So by putting together the chicken dance, then by putting together the chicken dance, we'll be a lot more efficient and catch any consensus issues earlier, which is especially important as we move to 6.0. So that's why we focused on blocks log, or the replays using blocks. In this case,
we both just became the thumbnail
before
for the video.
Those videos posted. Yeah, before this video is posted, I'm gonna have Liam deep fake you into a chicken For the so every time it goes to you, you'll be a chicken.
Can I get a zoom filter that'll turn him into? I promise you, Judge, I am not a chicken. One thing it may fall into is, I've always said, because I break everything I touch, a state history tool or even the expansion of leap util. So because even though the chain consensus was valid, the blog itself actually kind of got wonky for some reason. So it may be better off to kind of fall into, all right, validate the chain with the block log consensus. But if you want to validate state history, maybe you can toss it into a leap util feature and not bloat your chicken dance.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and here's why it's a really good point, because when we have internal discussions, there was a chicken dance before, right, at a previous, right,
wedding,
yeah, and and people want to rebuild that, right, and I think it's a good point of just like, what are our priorities? What is the most important thing to do? And we don't necessarily have to the priority shouldn't necessarily be rebuilding what we had before, but building what we need to help us move into the future. So thank you. Good perspective.
Yeah, it's worth noting that our immediate need for this is making sure that consensus hasn't broken when we make changes that have high risk of potentially breaking consensus. And so that's what our focus is now. But we can potentially expand this tool in the future for other use cases, or take what we've learned from it and apply it to build other tooling. But yeah, thank you for that input. I wanted to go into the topic of the blocks log stride setting Ross brought up. Ross, could you introduce that topic for us?
So I've been using blocks.log strides. I actually just did an article on it, how to get best value out of it. It's 3.6 terabytes for the blocks.log, and every time we want to back it up, it's this monolithic file that we've been backing up, and it can be a little bit nasty, especially if you archive that into some kind of zip or tar or Z standard. You don't get any duplication when you put it into your archive. So that breaks that. So the idea of breaking up the blocks.log into multiple strides, every million blocks or so, it'll create like a separate file and start a new file for the next million blocks for the blocks.log and block index is excellent. And yeah, like I said, I just did an article on it. I think it's definitely going to help us ensure that there are a lot of block producers of guilds archiving the data, because it's easy to archive now and keep it current, because you only have to archive the latest stride. My question was, the same thing can be done with the state history files, but I believe that there was a bug at some point. Michael, I think you said there's a bug. Someone said there's a bug.
I don't use striding, so I mean, any of the bugs I ran into weren't related to the striding.
All right. So, Kevin, do you know of anything?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Is there something funny?
There's been a number of bug fixes for Leap. Let me just see if I can find anything.
I think Seth was beating on it pretty hard, trying to split up, and maybe he ran into some quirks with it. I don't remember.
The only quirk I found is that Leap utils, it only allows you to query blocks.log and index and blocks.index. Doesn't let you query the block 1 to 275 million file or whatever it might be. But you can actually rename them, and then you can query them.
Yeah,
you could probably add a parameter just to include like an archive directory, and it could pick it up.
Yeah, there was a fix to striding that's not released for 4.0. So yes, the short answer there is yes, and we haven't released a fix yet.
What was the problem?
During striding, we didn't reset the index file when we wrote to it, and so you get a corrupted you would get corrupted log files for your splits.
Okay, because I haven't found that problem at all.
Well, I mean, it's dependent on like timing, so you won't necessarily get it. But yeah, it's there. I was able to reproduce it.
Oh, okay. Okay, I better add a caveat to my article.
Don't do stage history.
Yeah, well, I mean, hopefully we'll get that released soon. Otherwise, you could build release 4.0 branch yourself, which would include that fix.
Yeah. Okay.
Or 3.2, I don't believe has the problem. I'm sure still using 3.2.
Oh no, I'm not. 4.04, I think. Yeah, 1 million blocks works great, Matthew. I mean, I did all sorts of ungodly things in order to break it, and it seemed to just be so solid. It just worked.
On the block log, right? You haven't, or you did tackle the state history too. I mean, you sat and had that issue.
No, okay. I haven't. So Kevin, you talking about block log or?
Oh no, I'm talking about ship.
History?
I'm talking about.
Oh, okay.
Ship.
All right. So
I'm sorry. I thought you were asking about ship. No,
I was. But all my testing has been block log and block index. So we all good. Yeah, we all golden there, right?
Yeah, so it's just the ship. I'm not aware of any issues that we fixed around block log splitting. I believe it's been stable.
It's very stable. It's very, very solid. It should be the standard. We should all just agree that we're going to be striding at 1 million blocks or something like that, and that way everybody can use their little segments interchangeably. Very good. I mean, it's 3.6 terabytes today on Wax. A couple of years, it'll be 7, 8 terabytes. It's just not easy to archive it and to make sure that you've got it stashed away if you're just always dealing with one big chunk.
Yeah, is Wax block log bigger than EOS block log?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I mean, EOS is about 3 terabytes, but I think Wax has finally surpassed it. And the state history is
Wax is 3.6. State history is 9 terabytes.
Wow, that's crazy.
I'll look up EOS real quick.
Yeah. Okay.
So just to summarize, Ross, you're using this now, and the benefit you're after is basically simplifying backups and data recovery. Is that right? Because you're
absolutely. Yeah, that's the big benefit. But I mean, as I was speaking to Matt the other day, you could get trickety. You could actually archive older block slogs on slower spinning disks if you wanted to. You can get all trickety. You can do stuff with the data. The point is now it's not just a monolithic file. It can be split up in lots of files, and that gives you options. And because it's immutable, all of the old strides, they're never going to change ever. So all good.
The EOS block log is 2.9 terabytes right now, and state history is 8.2 terabytes. So yes,
that's interesting. They're less different than I expected.
Well, I mean, it's been this Wax has been growing at a much.
EOS had a big head start there, so
but they stopped. I can tell you this: my state history on Wax grows, I think, about 40 gig a day between the log and the state hist. So, and EOS didn't quite that much.
Yeah, and the blocks archives or it compresses quite easily on ZFS. You always get like 30%, even when you just tar it, you get like 30%. Ship, you're lucky if you get like 5%. Ship is already obviously quite compressed, so it doesn't archive very well.
Yeah, I think the format's zip. I can speak. Zip format.
Already, yeah. So when I archive it, zip the zip. Last bit of blood out of that stone.
Right. Well, it's the fast zip format, and it's the old zip. So yeah, better compression these days on almost anything. But
the Z standard
ship is already compressed. The block log has no compression at all. So yeah, that's not surprising to see the difference you see there.
Yeah.
There was a interesting few questions in the chat about this. So Matthew Darwin brought up the question of sort of checksum on the log, and likely, I assume, the strides of the log as well. It would be interesting to ensure that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know that we've ever paid attention. Like, it should be, unless there's like a file name in there, and I don't think there. I know there's not. So, yeah, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be byte or bit by bit exactly identical. At least I can't think of anything. So, yeah, they should be, but maybe we ought to like verify that and see. But yeah, they should be checksummable and identical.
It totally must be.
Yeah, it should be like if it's
Hold
not,
my beer.
I'd be really surprised. Although, I mean, unless there's
Am I the only person running strides right now?
Yeah. I'm not the only person. I mean, I am not. I think most of the other VPs have tinkered with it and are doing it. I would venture to say, just knowing I'm the man that always has 1 and a 0 crossed in on a file system or a memory bit, that I'm curious what would happen if it would be able to detect, some way that, EOS USA's got some corruption in the file.
Well, you wouldn't be able to
depending on, like, I mean, you're probably able to flip a bit here and there without it impacting anything. But otherwise, the replay of the lock log is validating that, all those transactions are exactly as expected. So, if you get anything of any significance difference, it should fail there. Now, ship, on the other hand, is not going to be compatible unless if you're running in the what do we call it, debug mode or something? I forget what we call ship, but
y'all called it debug.
Yeah, there is a mode that ship will run in where it should produce the identical files, but there's a mode that, and I think a lot of people run in that it doesn't. The mode that I think it's debug or whatever it's called, people like to run that mode because it provides additional information. However, that additional information is not deterministic.
Console logging is how people were bolting into being able to integrate better, is that they
right.
It was something I think about console logging, and that's not by default included. So you have to turn on debug and traces or something like that.
Now console logging, I think we could make deterministic across the board. It's the other things in trace, like CPU usage.
How I thought that the whole console logging was, if you hit my node with the action, that's where the logs were generated. I didn't think console logging got processed by everybody. I mean, I know obviously it's validating a transaction.
It doesn't have to be. It's whether it's enabled or not. Oh. But if it is enabled, like, it should be deterministic.
I wonder if there's would there be a benefit to having those sort of debug logs written separately, but in a way that they could still be kind of like zippered in sort of contemporaneously, you know what I mean?
Yep.
So ship logs are deterministic and consensus, even if you are running in debug mode.
Yeah.
Did y'all fix? I know Yates was blasting Ghostbuster ASCII into my logs, but I think y'all fixed
we fixed that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that wasn't console. That was I think the EOS agent name or something like that. But yeah, we fixed that. You can't do that anymore.
Oh, well, and I guess the same expansion on it, that was always a potential concern, I think, was that people would go crazy with their console logging and could really jam up even like layer 2 solutions because, and that's why it was kind of off by default. No, unless you want to bend over and expose it, you don't get ripped on a developer smashing console.
Yeah, that was one of those things that took a life of its own. The original purpose of console logging was simply debugging. You could use it for debugging when you're running, and then the idea was in production, everyone would just have it turned off. Like no one would ever see it. It's only for speculative nodes for when people are doing testing. However, it took a life on its own, and people used it as a poor man's event service. And there were things built on top of that. Different services relied on the console logging to make things happen as events. And I think people are still doing that, but that's
the main one was Liquid Apps. That's who always made me turn it on, or why I ended up turning it on. Obviously, they're not as much anymore. I do think maybe Telos EVM might use that to read.
Yeah, Telos EVM is very interesting. They may currently be using it. They're moving to a mechanism where they run a speculative node with a different contract using substitution plugin that generates all kinds of additional, well, yeah, I guess it's still through the logging, but it's a huge amount of additional logging. So they kind of have like their own proprietary speculative node that does additional processing.
But still, the only way to get that out is to console log it and scrape it. I mean,
I think that's the way they're doing it. It's not the only way. Like they could certainly do that other ways. Like at a previous company that I worked at, we did a more of an event service type of thing, where the contract would generate binary events so that you didn't have to do all the ASCII processing. It was much more efficient. So I mean, something like that could be done and built in. Like we've talked a long time about adding an event, a true event capability, I should say, within contracts, making it something that was actually part of the protocol. We haven't actually got around to doing all that, but maybe someday, maybe after instant finality, that might be something that could be tackled. I know it's something we've talked about a long time, doing a true event processing capability in the protocol.
To have it at layer 1 would be monumental. And I'm sure Matthew would be happy to remind us how it's native to many other protocols out of the box.
Yeah, I mean, right. Ethereum has something like that, of course, and we've again talked about it a long time. Hopefully at some point soon we can get around to doing that.
Sure.
Because yeah, the whole console thing is just a big hack. It's not very good.
So I also want to surface, another thing that was in the chat here, which is basically the reason we talked about whether or not the block logs are identical is if they are, and people sort of by convention use a standard stride, then that means they could be shared on some kind of file sharing service, torrents, or Matthew Darwin mentioned that the graph is working on a file sharing service, something like that. And we also talked about ship logs shortcoming because some people run it in debug mode, and in fact that's not uncommon, and that makes it non-deterministic, and that there's potentially an opportunity if we could separate, like still serve those use cases without it muddying up the ship logs, then a similar benefit could be achieved there, which could help with well, all sorts of things. Actually, let's list those. What are some things that having these things, without lots of things, what are some benefits of if you could download chunks of block log or chunks of ship log from a file sharing service, what would that gain for you?
It allows you to instantly have a full node.
I mean, technically that's no different than downloading the 3 terabytes of one big log file. No, it does make it easier.
Yeah. All right. Sorry, you about to say what I was going to say.
Cool. I was going to say, dividing and conquering, right? I mean, right now, when I rip on Ross, it's sequential and it's nonstop until I get from the beginning of the file to the end. If there's multiple sources, you can, get right it. Remember that? Multiple, streams coming in. That way I can rip on Seth and Nations and Australia.
The big one for me is just keeping it current. I don't have to back up the whole monolithic file all the time. I've just got the backup and I can just add. Correct. And I can archive and copy it across to the store server while the node is live, because it's just historical information. It's constant, it's stagnant. It's
stagnant, exactly. Static.
It's immutable. It's there. It's great. And it's brilliant. It's transformed my life.
Right. And it also, most people probably throw it on slower hardware. That was kind of some of the idea behind it, was if you're going to have to store 3 terabytes of logs that 1 out of 1,000 people will ever use, but damn it, you got to have it because somebody needs it. It allows you to offload that to a much cheaper, in theory, storage solution.
Well, what I was thinking, the next level, you could have a network store and have
NFS.
everybody, well, whatever you want to use, a mount point on your node pointing through to a store somewhere that had a single block log, or the old one, one of the strided ones, and everybody could use the same one. I don't know, I haven't done that, but
that just seems like a recipe for disaster. You're gonna let EOS dance in that mesh?
I know. But hey, you could have multiple nodes with a full-on NVMe block log. If you needed high speed, right? If you needed to have the high speed disk, you could put it somewhere, even with the ship, and you could have everybody share that super high speed array.
And then stream it over the interwebs?
Well, I was thinking more about on when you're serving, if you had to like scale, right? But you couldn't afford 16 terabytes of disk, high speed disk for all your nodes. Well, you know what I mean, you could just have a central one.
That is interesting for like developer nodes or something like that, where they're just quickly spinning up a full node but doesn't need all of that storage space. So.
Yeah, so a mount point through to a full node store. So you could have like 100 full nodes for the cost of 1 full node. Just thinking out of the box here. When we want to hyperscale our nodes.
I'm not with Ross, because when I screw up one of my nodes, I don't want it to kill all the other dozen. I've done that before.
Well, I was saying only the strided historical data you keep. That's never going to be changed. I get it.
I've never missed a number in my block log truncations and trimmed it instead of to 290 million to 29 million. That's never happened.
I've just realized why you always break stuff is because you actually really try your best to break stuff.
I read 90%, and the 10% that was important I skip. And yeah, I like to smash buttons. And I run consumer grade hardware. Somebody's got to do it, because not everybody lives in those enterprise levels like the rest of you guys. Anyway, it's a great feature. I mean, I'm definitely, anything's better than a 3.6 terabyte lethargic text file.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, it was Kevin's fingers that typed out the stride code. I don't recall. So I'm sure it's
had a couple of versions, right? I think y'all did a version and then redid it, right? Oh, 2.1. Never mind. I don't want to bring that up.
So I'm sure it's good to be hearing the ways it's being used and the benefits it's bringing. And it's also good for me to be hearing some future potentials for building on this to make things even better. So very cool.
I would say one last little update that came to mind is, if you're shooting for information at a specific range, it'd be easier to, I'm assuming you can use the logs individually to spit out to JSON or whatever, right? I know some people have kind of had to go back in time, and it's really difficult if you have to go get a 3.6 terabyte log just to get 800 blocks that were staggered, throughout time or something. Does that make sense? That making a more compartmentalized, I don't use those tools, but I know there's like an output to JSON or stuff. You could do that much sooner than having to go rip on Ross for 3 weeks.
But you can also just have your own archive. You can create your own archive relatively inexpensively.
Correct. I mean, for somebody else. That's what I mean. If we're slicing them up and making it, you offer it in that aspect, you're going to have a lot more people being able to do it, right? It's easier to create them. It's easier to, work with them.
So I've added it through our snapshot server. I've now got the strided block logs as the backup. Watch how I will single-handedly make 1 million block strides the de facto standard for wax.
I don't know. Seth's got his touring. I think, Seth, didn't you start with 250K? I think I remember you kind of played around with all your different file sizes, but that may be the two competing standards, VHS and Betamax.
Yeah, I like the million because it gives you just over a week. It's like a week and a half.
250K.
250K is just too short. I don't know. I just like the chunks.
Okay, you've got the kangaroo standard and the canary standard. I'm fine with that. Pick your poison.
It's like metric and imperial. Notice how mine's like even cool million. And yours is one quarter of a million.
I'm gonna go with 432 because I'm American and that's what we do.
If a million is just over a week, 250K would be like just under 2 days. Is that
how big was a million, Ross? How big was that file?
It's
give or take.
How big is it? Oh, the file's not big.
The 1 million chunks. I mean, if I were to I could go and look.
I think it's 12. It's 12 days for a million.
Data size wise, gigabytes.
Wait, hold your horses. It is.
While he's looking at that, Kevin, aside from like user considerations, what are the trade-offs between like a larger stride and smaller stride?
I mean, there's really probably any trade-offs there in terms of it's just, there's no difference in really performance or anything. Now, that being said, I mean, Linux and most operating systems, file systems, standards have issues once you get above, a few thousand files within a directory. So, depending on
not single block strides then.
Yeah, no.
Or 100 blocks.
Yeah, a block per file would certainly cause you issues on most operating systems. On most file systems, it's not the OS so much as the file system standard. I think most of them have issues once you go above a few thousand files within a directory. They're just not designed for that. So that's the only caveat you got to watch out for, is you don't want to get to a situation where you have thousands upon thousands of files within a directory, because even simple things like LS can cause problems when you do that.
I hide that with logs. Yeah, I see that with logs sometimes.
Right.
Oh, I see it with the diffuse, those 100 block files. I mean, it handles it, and he's right. Matthew's right. I mean, your file system choices can impact that as well. But yeah, you get 290 million or 29 million. 2 million 100 block files, and it started to.
Okay, it's interesting that ZFS is.
But it doesn't access them. Like diffuse just uses the 100 merge blocks to seed in a way, like new services. But later it just like syncs directly with the mind reader. So it's really just used like to seed initially. It's not constantly reading those files.
Yeah, no, I just more meant that was my exposure to cutting a massive block log up into 100 block files and then doing an LS on it.
It actually does them as one block files first. And if you forget to run your merger, you're just going to have one file per block.
Oh, that's right. I did get jammed up because you're right. I had a couple thousand one block files in there. You're right. Nice. I screwed it up royally.
Yeah, so that'd be the only thing I'd say to watch out for the block log, is just and that's file system dependent. It's interesting that Matthew says ZFS is fine for large number of files. I know it's not just ETX4. There's a lot of other file systems as well that has issues with that. So watch out for that. The only other thing I will say is this is not an issue for block log. Block log is fine. Once a file is split, it will never be written to again ever. That's not true for ship. So ship, when you split the file, if you're running on a node that's not running in irreversible mode, So if you're running on default mode for a ship, a fork can happen, which would require to then write back over that split. So that can happen. So if you're going to like move that file or make it or consider it immutable, that's what I'm looking for. You want to make sure that the block number that's there is irreversible. Otherwise, there is a small chance that a fork could happen, and it would need to go back and write to that file. So just watch for that if you're doing stuff with ship splitting. Give it just a little bit of time to become stable before you do something with it, because
that could happen. That could happen on the stride itself. So let's say my stride is every 100 blocks.
Yep.
Get to 99 blocks.
Yep.
Okay.
Or 101. I mean, if the fork happens at 101, it's going to go back and try to cut off.
That's what I mean. Yeah, that's what I mean.
Right. So either wait, some number of like, a few hundred blocks to make sure that it's certainly going to be irreversible, or actually look and see where irreversible is, and pay attention to that.
How does the block log not run into that?
Well, the block log is only written when a block is irreversible. So non-irreversible blocks are not in the block log.
Okay.
So if you're running, those are all just kept in memory until they become irreversible. Then they're written to the block log. The ship file is writing head blocks as it's happening, and so then it therefore has to go back and rewrite over the file occasionally. But
it could rewrite over if it happened just within the 240 odd blocks. It could rewrite the stride before. That'll be no problem. They can still do that as long as it's within that space.
Yeah, I mean, if your stride size was 100, then it could go back multiple stride files. But if your stride file
and then
is a million.
But what I'm saying is, it would edit that latest stride.
Yep.
As long as I'm just backing up strides from before, that's fine. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. Exactly. So, and it's only going to be, when there's a fork, and it's only going to be when you're right close to the edge. And, so if you always did one stride back, ignored the current
you'll be fine.
latest, or paid attention to LIB, or just wait for 500 block, or whatever. Now, of course, once instant finality comes along, that'll be even smaller number of issues there where you have to worry about that, or run your ship node in irreversible mode is the other way of doing that.
That's probably the winner. Yeah.
I'm still curious though, because back to me breaking shit. When and Ross did it the other day. I think I had to talk to him about, or no, Dimitri. It was Dimitri over at Bounty Block, I think. But they had a node that powered off and crushed the block log. And so he was fighting to get it back, and we had to go back, just like I always found, is that no, you can't trim the last one. You have to trim at least, call it now 350, to get back beyond the lib, because that block log says, nope, until you get rid of the last 300, give or take, I'm still going to be invalid. To me, that tells me, or it makes me think, that there's something about that block log that knows from irreversible to head, because I'm having to trim it off to get that block log to be happy again. I don't need to tell the mechanic how the engine works.
Right. No, I mean, it is only strictly irreversibles in the block log. However, it writes it, and like if you watch irreversible move, like irreversible doesn't move one block at a time. Right, it jumps
each round
12 blocks or so at a time, and so those are all written in little bursts. So depending on where we flush the log, well, I have to look. Like I thought we flushed the log, but it's going to be dependent on like your OS settings and your your disk that you're using, on like when it actually writes to the file, because the disk cache could be saving up a lot of information that is somehow that doesn't actually get to the physical device. So if you pull the plug, you may get a number of, like what you're saying, you have to go back quite a bit, because there's things cached at the OS level that haven't made
but that should be like 12 though. I mean, worst case is what you're saying, right? Okay, commit plus the logs. It ain't 12.
Well, then that's probably your OS or disk cache that's not getting flushed when you lose power there. So the disk may be
For 300
this cache may be
blocks?
saving
No
up a
way.
megabyte or more. You know, it could be caching a lot of information where it's not actually on the physical. Like, and disks are allowed to do this. Like, disks can tell the OS, oh yeah, it's good, and it's really not. It's setting just in the disk cache.
In the right cache, yeah.
I mean, it could be. I mean, these are NVMe, and they're so I'm not going to say the cache couldn't be there, but they're just
yeah. I mean, there could certainly be something else there, but I mean,
I would say the same thing. Then the potential for the log to not be right could be there because it wouldn't have that ability to go back and fix whatever was in that stride. Unlike state history that goes, oh yeah, that shit happens all the time. Let me go fix it. If it one is just
it's the same reason you need to like eject, you know, like a USB stick or something. It's just because basically like it's just gonna write, it's gonna tell you it's done, but it's not guaranteed it's done. If something is gonna be slow, it's gonna delay it. If file access is slow, it's gonna delay it right later. And you can't guarantee it until it flushes everything.
I agree, but that inability to guarantee is what conflicts with the thought process that once that log has been written at that line crossed, it would never change. That there's something about
if it's actually written.
Yeah, but we don't do the hard sync. We do a flush, but we don't do the hard sync to disk where we ask the OS to you know, you can block and say, okay, OS, I'm not going to return until this is absolutely, like, you guaranteed that it's on the disk. And even then, like, I think the OS is allowed to lie to you, but typically, you know, that gets you where you want. We don't pay that price. Like, Node.js is not currently designed. We've talked about going through and doing some of this sort of thing, but we're currently not we're currently not set up for the pull the plug sort of recovery.
Well, I mean, I get that in concept of a couple of seconds or even 12 seconds, but we're talking minutes. I mean, there's no way the disk cache or the OS lying.
Oh, you might be surprised.
Could have battery-powered cache.
It's literally an NVMe plugged straight into the motherboard, but
yeah, but I think it's doing caching anyway. I hear you, Mike, but it definitely
there is. I don't disagree, but it's not caching for 3 minutes. I'm having to go back 3 minutes of blocks on the log because it will not accept that log file until 350 blocks have been trimmed from it. Again, that's just really where I'm like, that just,
I mean,
because it only happens to me. This will only happen to me if the power goes off, and the power has to go off.
I agree.
Even if I force stop the service,
space
you know, like
will
when
do
you
it
don't
too,
even let it,
tell you.
even if you force it where it hasn't had a graceful exit, it won't do it. It only does it when the power goes off.
Two ways to reproduce it. Run out of space to 0 bytes and power trip it at the right time.
We never run out of space anymore.
Yeah, no, right? 20%. You can thank me for that. You know why? Because it corrupts your damn logs. But my point is that I'm not, if the file has to be trimmed for 300 blocks to make it work again, there's a potential that, I mean, a whole third of 1,000 block stride would need to be rewritten or trimmed and there's something, and I don't know, maybe it's in an index file. Normally I'm just doing these with block logs, so I don't think it's the index, but I've finally figured out the hard way that it wasn't 12 blocks, it was hundreds. And then somebody finally went, duh, that's the lib. And I'm like, oh shit.
Well, you always know when it's broken also when you start the node app and it'll say
unable to unpack the producers.
Yeah, you can't find the schedule. Something to do with the schedule is wrong. And that then you know
unpacking the schedule. Shit.
Yeah.
But exactly, you now have to go and trim at least 300 blocks off, which could far jump across a stride, sounds like. So there's something about it in there. That's why I'm curious. I mean, I question the mechanic, and the mechanic keeps hitting me with a wrench and telling me to shut up. So I will shut up. So
I mean, there could certainly be something there.
Get a UPS.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
I'm a generator.
There's the reason these things exist.
I got it. Trust me, I learned that.
You've got two of them there in the back. I can see them. They're right
there. No, those are batteries because the generator. Oh yeah, I guess the APCs. But yeah, we have a 60 kilowatt generator. I can run for 4 weeks off of
Doesn't
the
sound
rack
like it.
for generator.
Sounds like your power goes off all the time.
No. That didn't. You haven't heard me bitch about that in a long time. I actually was working on it with Dimitri because Hetzer killed one of their servers or something, and then he was scrambling to try to get a 3.6 terabyte block log back online, and was not very happy that it was bitching about the producers.
Yeah, so I mean, here, like I was saying, if I on our million block stride, it's an 8 gig file, before it's archived, so it's going to still get 30% on that. So if you're in a million strides, synced up with that standard, you could just copy. I mean, 8 gigs, like you copy it like that, right? Boom, boom, on, carry on.
I get it, and like I say, the frequency that it occurs and why it occurs, obviously, you know why. I was just bringing up, he said the block log never changes because it's only irreversible blocks. And I twitch because I'm like, I'm having to trim back before the live 300 blocks. Like I say, I mean, it says, hey, your block log contains up to this block, like head block. And so then I say, no, it doesn't. It needs to go back 350, and then I don't get the unpack error. But to me, that tells me that block log has something to do with non-lib blocks, because I'm having to trim them, supposedly, to get back. I don't know. That's just what that was. I get that it doesn't happen, and if you don't turn your servers off, it doesn't happen that often. The point is to make that assumption that those block logs never stride that far. It doesn't seem like that.
Because before it was, remember, there was reversible blocks folder where they're written, and now it's in memory. Like, just because you have
there's
to
still
sometimes...
a reversible blocks folder, right?
I guess I'm not sure. I didn't check it in a while. But the point is, just because it's when it's writing only irreversible, it doesn't guarantee that the OS wrote it or your disk actually has it there. It's just like when Node EOS is writing to it, is only pushing lib, like
it's not in the reversible directory, because when we're trying to recover from this, we're having to use a snapshot, obviously, because state's broke. And when you use a snapshot, you have to dump state and blocks reversible. And I still get the unpack error. So it's got to either be in the blocks index or the blocks log, right? I mean,
I personally think that it's an OS issue. It's not writing the data, because it happens when the power goes off.
I agree. It's questioning the assumption that can't happen. Hold my beer.
Yeah, well, and that's why, we archiving it, once every 2 weeks, and it's the last one, so whatever, it's all good.
It's kind of like the last burst of irreversible does it write correctly, versus saying that it's trying to write reversible blocks. It's two different things,
It could also be that the operator has beer.
That usually makes things a lot easier.
But I was about to say, maybe that's what I need.
Ran out and unplugged.
All right. Well, we're at time now. So
right.
thanks for that conversation. I think I'm certainly inspired to see how some of these things are being used, and some of the ways that we could improve them even further in the future, or use them for improvement in the future. So really cool.
Go unplug some shit.
For anybody who is on the road for holidays, safe travels. And for the rest of the world, I'll see you next week. And this is my attempt at closing out well, and I've got nothing else to say. So there you go.
We got to close out with the chicken dance.
Cheers, guys. Take care.
See you guys.
Bye.
All right,
I hope I get a chicken head in the video.